Hi, welcome to Math 317, Lecture 34. This is our second of the class presentations by Timothy on Nash equilibria and recent paradoxes.
So today I'm going to be talking about Newcomb's paradox, the prisoner's dilemma, and rock, paper, scissors. So quick show of hands, how many of us have heard of Newcomb's paradox? How many of us have heard of the prisoner's dilemma? Great. And how many of us have heard of rock, paper, scissors? Wonderful. Great. Okay. So Newcomb's paradox goes like this. Oh, I should get my. Okay. So we have an almighty predictor. And our almighty predictor is feeling generous and going to give some money. So he has two boxes. Box A has $1,000. And box B depends. So you have two options for what you can do. One option is to open up both boxes. And your other option is to open up only B. And so our almighty predictor has always been correct in his predictions. And if he predicts both, then he won't put any money in B. But nope, other way. Then he'll put $1 million. I'll do it this way. And no, that was the first time. If he predicts both, then he won't put any money in B. But if he predicts B only, then he'll put in $1 million. There we go. Okay, is this sound clear? So on one hand, you're incentivized to open up only B, because that way you'll get the $1 million. But on the other hand, like there's always 1,000 in A. So whatever happens in B, you're kind of incentivized to also open A to get that $1,000. So one way that we can represent this is as like a utility matrix, which I'm sure many of you have seen before. What is it?
And then so for this problem, what is the probability that both is predicted? What's the probability that B only is predicted?
Well, the predictor is always right. So
always right.
Yeah, well, it has always been right in the past. So you assume that the probability is about 100%.
So I'm a little confused. Is the predictor predicting what we're going to do?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So the predictor predicts what you're going to choose, puts the money in the box, and then you go and make your decision.
Okay.
So to clarify,
Yeah.
The predictor thinks it will pick both. It'll put 0 in the second box.
Yeah, and then 1,000 in A.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And we're playing with complete information. We know this about B.
Yeah, you know this. Yeah, and you know that the predictor. So if you open up both boxes and the predictor is correct, then he wouldn't put anything in B, so you get $1,000 total. If he predicts both, but you actually only open B, then you don't get any money at all. If you only open up B and that's what the predictor predicted, then you get the $1 million. And if you open up both, but the predictor predicted that you would only open B, then you get the $1 million and the $1,000. So do it this way, which is great. So there's the reason that we call this a paradox is because you have two like seemingly rational ways of looking at the problem, but then you end up with two different best options. So one way to look at it is to say, that you always want to pick the one, like no matter what the predictor does, you always want to pick what you can do best from what the predictor has already done. So we say that the predictor already put the money in the boxes. So if it's already on A or A and B, then you want to open A and B because it's $1,000 that you can get from also opening A. And if the predictor already put $1 million, then it's the same idea. You lose out on the $1,000 if you don't also open A. On the other hand, if you have if you use like a probability expected utility argument, then you would say this case never happens and this case never happens. So you should only open B. And there's this sort of tension because like it seems rational to open both, but it doesn't pay to act rationally. So if it pays to act irrationally, then it's kind of saying that being irrational is the rational option. So we'll come back to this.
That's premised on the predictor always being correct going forward in time as well, or just up until this time?
Up until this time. Yeah, but yeah, I guess you would say you have reason to believe that he'll still be correct, but you wouldn't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we can move on to prisoner dilemma. So the prisoner's dilemma is normally phrased as years in prison, but because I think it'd be more fun for us to actually play the game, we're going to do it as like points that you want to get, say on like, well, I'm not the professor, but we'll pretend that these are like points you want to get on your final exam, bonus points. But only the person who gets the most bonus points will actually get those points. So like, yeah, so you're not collaborating with your classmates to try to get the most points out of the class. Only the person who gets the most will.
What if two people have the same number of points? Do you both get it, or does neither get it?
I suppose you could say both.
Because that really changes how you play.
Yeah, I guess it does. I had not thought of that.
Right.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So again, we'll have a nice little payoff matrix. Is anyone here colorblind? Great. Okay. So this is the other person. And your options are to defect or to collaborate. Okay. So what I want you to do is to play this game with each other person in the class. And your goal is to get as many points as you can. You can't talk with the person about like what your strategy is before you play the game. And your goal your goal is not to try to get more points than the person you're playing with, but to get the most points by yourself, like overall. Is that clear? Okay, go for it.
All right, so first row play first row, second row play second row. Oh no, actually no, your first row play second row. You have a nice table there, and you can say socially distant. So they're playing once, or they're playing multiple times?
You're playing once with each person.
Okay.
Yeah, so just once with each person in the class.
Can you go over the rules again?
Yeah. Also, I have.
Just pick one blindly and then like flip.
Well, so right. I should,
If you both pick D, you each get 1 point. If you pick D and the other person picks C, you get 5 points.
and the other person doesn't get
And the other
anything.
point doesn't get 0. And if you both pick C, you each get 3 points. And you're trying to maximize.
So we should just say it at the same time.
Yeah, or you can like write it down and then show it to each other.
Do we want people to know the results of other games?
No.
So you can't tell anybody when you're playing the next round what happened in your first round. You have to keep that secret. Because again, it's a very different game if you know someone's history.
Right.
So when you play someone, you just keep track of, did you get 0, 1, or 0, 1, 3, or 5
5
points?
points, yeah.
And in the case that
So if you both do D, you each get 1. If you do 2 C's, you each get 3. If you do a D and a C, whoever did the D successfully screwed the other person out
Yeah.
5. So if you both try to screw, you both get 1. If you both try to collaborate, you get 3 points. If some advantage of them, you get 5 points, which is less utility for the whole group, but more for you. And I will give a reward to whoever has the most points.
Oh, wonderful. I will say it is basically the end of the semester. So if you do choose to screw someone over, you're not going to have to sit next to them for much longer.
Don't let people see the results of your previous game. You have to keep all the games to the rest of it. Just write 1. You have to write D or C.
For each time you play.
You're gonna play 3 games. You can't let anybody know the outcome of the previous game. So just write D or C, and then you're gonna show it to the person.
Yeah.
So you can't let anybody see that when you go to the second game.
That's fine.
No, you're gonna, it's not hard, guys. You play each person once, it's gonna be 3
Oh,
games.
once, okay.
Just one.
Yeah, each person once, but you play.
Each person
yeah.
once. And you can't tell anybody else what happened. So for instance, if Paul screws you, you can't say, Paul, so that the next will know that he screwed.
I'll control myself.
You have to control yourself, okay?
Yeah, so you can set up like a table of what you do, what the other person does, and then the points you get from that. And then you'll have three rows for each of the 3 people that you play.
But the point is, you have no information about what the person did in other games that they played. All that you know is you have 3 individual games. We should pause on the recording.
Okay. Okay, great. So can someone tell me, what did you do? What happened? How many points did you get?
I have 3 points. I think D each time.
I had 2. D, D, C, and then he did D.
Wow, okay.
I did D each time and ended up with 7.
I know it was 7.
7.
Oh,
I did
Oh.
D, I lost.
Great. Okay, so
What did you do? You did. I did C to him, so I lost to him, and I did D for them. So I got 6 points. So you were nice initially, you were screwed and good, and then you decided to screw people out.
yeah, I think so.
you're 5.
Me.
So I think we do have someone with the most points. Congratulations. So we're gonna, so we have this incentive to defect because like if the other person cooperates, you can screw them over and get more points by defecting. And so you go from 3 points to 5 points. But if the other person defects, you also have an advantage to defect because you would get 0, but if you defect, then you get 1. So like no matter what the other person does, you're incentivized to defect, even though it's not like an optimal case for everyone.
What's interesting is the maximum in the class was a 7, I believe, in 3 games. If everybody had collaborated each time, how much would everybody have? 9. And just think about this. This is in a small class where we know each other. What is the real goal like?
So we're not quite gonna go through the whole proof of the Nash equilibrium, but I do want to introduce some of the important notation. Important, I guess. So let's say N is our set of N players. So can someone tell me what about this game or rock, paper, scissors? Like what are some of the characteristics of these games that are maybe different from like Monopoly, or I don't know, Candyland, or some real world things like investing? Like what are some of the characteristics of these games that make it different from other games?
Fixed outcomes.
Sorry?
Fixed outcomes.
Fixed outcomes, good. So not only that, but you also have like a known set of actions that you can choose from, right? It's not just like you're rolling a dice and then whatever happens, whatever. You have a set of actions. So we can have A1, A2 to AN. Set. Oh, and then we can consider like what you do and what everybody else does as like a profile. And we can think of that kind of like a vector. Oops.
The game we just played for 2 players, how many profiles would it have been?
4.
4. One had 2 possibilities, C or D.
And then, like you said, you have known utilities, which is often not the case. But good. Okay. What else? There's like another key one. Like, what were you not allowed to do before you played the game? Good. So NashEquilibria talks about non-cooperative games. There's another one. And to kind of explore the other one, we're going to play again. But this time, how about the 2 of you in the front row can play together, the 2 in the back row can play together, and you're going to play the same person 5 times. Go back to the matrix. So obviously, after the first one, you're like, when you get to the second one, you're going to know what the other person has been doing.
You do it 5 times.
5 times.
Then defaults.
So we work together and play against them.
No, you
I scribble out the
Okay. So can someone tell me what happened?
I went D every time.
Oh, okay. How did that go for you?
Pretty well for me.
Better narrative.
Yeah, okay. So Brenda, what happened?
I went C and he went D, and I was like, oh, C again, just so he like gets that like. Then we get interesting. And then he went D, so I went D, and then on the last one, I went C again. And he went D.
Okay. So why cooperate? What was your thought on cooperating at first?
First, well, the first one, I don't know, I just wanted to like get the 3 points or potentially the 5. But I was
Well,
pretty sure I wasn't gonna get the 5.
You won't get 5 by cooperating. Though. You only get 5 if you defect and Barrett cooperates.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, reverse that. Then I was looking for the 3.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yes.
Okay. So you're looking for the 3 and you wanted to try cooperating at first so you could stack up some 3s.
Yeah, and I thought that he would get that idea, but he didn't.
Okay.
I just didn't want 0 points, so I went D because you always end up
With at least 1.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're playing 5 games, so like you could stack up some more by getting some 3s first. Okay.
But then, yeah,
So how many points did you end up with?
17.
2. Oh gosh. All right, back row. What happened?
I think D all 5 times and had 9 points.
So,
C for the first round.
okay.
Yeah.
So what was your thought for picking C at first?
It's just the same as, yeah, I want to get 3 points at first.
Yeah. So
And go where.
okay, so this is kind of not what I was expecting, but it's okay. So when you have like repeat 5 times, I think Brennan or Fred, you were thinking that you could cooperate and stack up some points at first, right? That, you know, if you like cooperate, they could get 3 points and get some more points and build them up first. If say you had cooperated the first 4 times, what would you do the last time? Good. Why?
Because you would probably be
Good. Right. So your incentive for cooperating is kind of so that you can keep cooperating and keep stacking up points. But for the last one, there's nothing later, so you might as well defect. But this isn't really equilibrium, because if both of you do this, well, if you're going to throw away your last round, you might as well also throw away your second to last round. Because you can say that you have confidence that the last one's going to be defect, so you might as well throw away. Like you can it's like a marching backwards type of argument that your second to last one you can also throw out. So we had 2 people defect the entire time. I don't know if you're thinking through this all of it. that is kind of your equilibrium that you're going to just end up plowing through and just defecting every single time. Oh, that's an eraser. Okay. So we're gonna play again. It's gonna be the same pairs, and you're gonna play multiple times. And we're gonna do this together because we're gonna play some number of rounds, but I'm not gonna tell you how many rounds we're gonna play. Do you understand? Great.
So we pause the recording.
I don't care. Okay. Do we have our decision for the first round? Okay. You can share. All right, are we ready for the second round? Okay, you can share.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, we can talk after. Okay, are you ready for the third round? Okay, sure. Okay, fourth round. Sure. Okay, one more round. Oh, I shouldn't say that.
Oh.
All right. Okay. Well, okay. Well,
Or you might be lying. I'm not sure if you're.
sure. Okay. Fifth round. Okay, we'll do a sixth round. Okay, I think we can stop. So, Paul, you had a, what were you going to say?
I was just saying that it seems like the optimal strategy is just to pick 2 the whole time, because you're guaranteed to have greater than or equal to the amount of points of the other person per round. So if you're in like a one-on-one matchup,
Well, but your goal isn't to get more than the other person. Your goal is just to get the most, like as much as you can.
You want to get as many points as possible.
yeah,
Your success does not depend on other people's failure.
that's fair. Guess I'm okay for something.
Does anyone have any thoughts to share? No. Okay. So,
Well, I mean, everyone is getting stuck in the deep, which long term is not good for you. it's giving you on average 1 point per round. And once the other person is doing D and you're doing D, you're stuck there. What could you do to get out of D?
Tossing some Cs every once in a while.
So if you did 1 C and then went back to D, I think that would be a good strategy.
Probably not.
What if you did 2 Cs in a row? What might that do to the person who you're playing with?
Make him more inclined to peace.
So the question is, could you do 2 Cs to signal them that I'm willing to collaborate? I'm willing to take a hit twice.
Then come back to the D.
You could then come back to the D and then the person might say, well, you know, that's only fair. I got 2 Ds, so I'm going to give you a chance. And then maybe you do C, C, D, and then all Cs from that point. But in real life, it's very easy to get stuck in positions like this where someone has to make the first move. Someone has to be the bigger person. If you've ever had a younger sibling.
So yeah, so the hope or the thought is that if you don't know how long you're going to be playing, or if you're playing some sort of infinite game, then you would be better off like always picking C, or cooperating is the goal, so that you could stack up on your 3s instead of just being stuck in a D of always getting 1. Apparently that's not what happened. So not sure what that says about us, but that's not what happened. So our last key component here is that the game has to be finite. Yep. All right, so one thing I want to mention here, right, is that Newcomb's paradox is kind of weird in this regard because one of our conditions is non-cooperative. You're not supposed to be able to like communicate with the other person. Newcomb's paradox kind of has one player that sort of like knows everything. So there's this like information imbalance. So we've already talked a little bit about how like the information you have about your other player can change how you want to act. So part of the reason why Newcomb's paradox is so like iffy is that you don't know how the predictor makes its prediction. You don't know if it will continue predicting correctly. And there's a lot of uncertainty about like the information. So we said that we all know how to play rock, paper, scissors. So that's good. Rock. Spell that. So we have that paper covers rock, rock smashes the scissors, and the scissors can cut the paper. So if you're playing this over and over and over, would you play rock every single time? Why not?
And then your moves would be predictable.
Good. So I wanted to use rock, paper, scissors as like an easier way to think about mixed strategies where you don't, like where you can switch what you do each time when you play over and over. So we can think of a mixed strategy as like capital S for each player is some probability distribution over how many options you have times the action or for the actions that are available to that player. That's a set of mixed strategies. Yes. And one thing I'll mention now, which will be important later, is that the sum of your probabilities is going to be 1. So like if you play rock half of the time and scissors half of the time and paper another time, your probabilities are going to be 1, no matter like what set of probabilities you choose. They have to add up to 1. And we can, so we had utility for like your like pure strategies, and we can use that to talk about utilities for like a mixed strategy. So hopefully I do this right. So let's say I play rock every time, and we have our predictor, which plays 1/3 each time. So we can calculate my utility using, say, 1 for when I win, 0 for when we do the same thing, and -1 for when I lose. That's like a natural way of putting utility to the rock, paper, scissors game. So there's a probability of 1 that I play rock, a probability 1/3 that the predictor plays paper, and my utility in that case is -1. And then there's a 1 probability that I play rock, 1/3 that the predictor also plays rock, and then 0 for my utility because we play the same thing. 1 is a probability that I play rock, 1/3 that the predictor plays. What are we doing now? Where I win. So where the predictor plays scissors, yeah. And then in that case, so my utility would be 0. And on the other hand, if I play rock every time and the predictor plays paper every time, then I lose every time. So my utility is -1, which kind of means that I lose every single time. So we can talk about the utility of a mixed strategy by thinking of like the probabilities of each case happening and adding that up for the utility that I would get for each case, and then summing them all up as a total utility for a mixed strategy. Yeah, we'll leave it there. So the nice thing about the way that we set up the probabilities is that we can look at our options as a triangle, right? And we can think of P, R, and S as like vectors. And we're talking about weighting these vectors, but the weights have to add up to 1. And hopefully that sounds a little familiar. So what we want to show is that we have a Nash equilibrium. So we're going to call a Nash equilibrium like a product of a mixed strategy for each player, so that the payoff, like the utility payoff for each person, is as high as it would be compared to when they choose all of their other mixed strategies, given that everybody else does their thing. So in other words, it's like saying that you can't improve your position given that everybody else stays at what they're doing. And that's true for every player. So Nash's theorem is that if we have like a finite non-cooperative game, then there'll always be a Nash equilibrium in with regards to like mixed strategies. And so I haven't quite built up all the notation that we'll need to prove it. But the idea is that we have some sort of function f, which goes from S, which is like everybody's mixed strategies, and we go onto itself. And so if we remember Brouwer's fixed point theorem, it says that if we have some sort of simplex, which here we're representing as like a triangle, and then we map it to itself, that it will have a fixed point. And so what we want our function to do is that we'll define it so that like our utility is greater than it was before, or like at least as good as it was before. So kind of the idea is that we look at if we have better options, and then we kind of put the better options together so that it maps to, so that each player gets mapped to a better mixed strategy. And so, you know, at these endpoints are where we have our pure strategy. So if you're up here, that's like playing rock all the time. That's like a weight of 1 on rock and 0 on paper and scissors. And then here, of course, is your pure strategy for paper and pure strategy for scissors. And the idea is that as you go along using your function, you know, you'll get like a sequence of points, and they'll have a convergent subsequence. And since your function always maps to another mixed strategy that's at least as good, we can show that that is your Nash equilibrium, that your fixed point is your equilibrium point. Okay. So a couple of final things I want to point out.
These are different numbers. then.
Yes, our threes have changed into tens. So in this case, you don't have, well, so when we were talking about stuff, when we're looking for solutions to our questions, right, we ask, does the solution exist? And we also ask, is that solution unique? So Brauer's fixed-point theorem says that there is a fixed point. And so we can show that there is a Nash equilibrium, but there is not necessarily like a unique Nash equilibrium. So let's say we have this version of the prisoner's dilemma. If the other person chooses defect, you are better off defecting. So you can get 1 point instead of 0. But if the other person chooses to cooperate, then you're better off cooperating to get 10 points instead of 5. No, wait. Yeah, 10 points instead of 5. So what I want to show is that like our Nash's theorem says that there is an equilibrium, but that's not necessarily the only equilibrium. And in this case, it's nice because now one of our equilibrium points is also our optimal point. But of course, we know that that's not always the case. So to end this off, I wanted to give a couple of like real world examples. So I think one of the best examples for the prisoner's dilemma in the real world is when we're talking about pollution. So everybody else can choose to drive their cars or to walk. And you can also choose to drive your car or to walk. And so if everybody else drives their car and there's going to be a bunch of pollution in the air, well, there's already a bunch of pollution, so you might as well drive your car and get to work faster. If nobody drives their car and there's no pollution in the air, well, you driving your car probably isn't going to be like the one little bit of pollution that goes over the edge. So you're better off driving your car and getting to work a little faster. But obviously, if everybody comes to that conclusion, we're all kind of screwed, which is unfortunately the case. And with regards to, where is it? Newcomb's paradox. We also have stuff like this something called Parfit's hitchhiker, which is saying that like, you know, you're a hitchhiker and you're stuck in like the middle of the desert, and someone comes to and offers to give you a ride, but they'll only give you a ride if you give them $100 at the end of the ride. But the fact of the matter is that if you get in their car and they give you the ride, whether or not you give the $100, you're already at your destination. So you're kind of incentivized to like take the ride, but then not actually give the $100. So choosing one box corresponds to being honest about it. So this is going out for free. And going on the ride. So this case shouldn't happen, right? You're not going to pay $100 and then not go on the ride. And this case shouldn't happen in the sense that like you shouldn't go on a ride and then not pay for it. But like you're kind of not incentivized to do this option because you could just go on the ride and go for free. So if the person giving the ride thinks that you're like not going to pay the $100, then he'll just drive away without you. And so we kind of end up in this case where it's the equivalent of the Newcomb's problem, where you only get $1,000 instead of 1,000,000 and 1,000. But like the thing about it being a ride, like that's not like, it doesn't have to be a ride. That kind of works for like any service that you're being provided. So like this is kind of the same thing as like Dine and Dash, where it's like they give you your food and you eat your food. Well, you've already eaten the food, so like you could not pay. Of course, we pay because they assume we're being honest. But like they can also assume you're not going to be honest and then think, well, if you're not going to pay, then we'll just not give you food. So, you know, when we're talking about like linear programming or optimization, a lot of times we want to optimize, but the equilibrium point just isn't optimal. And I think that's where I'll leave it.
Okay, so I'll make this go. This is very nice. You used a really good word, incentivize. So has anybody ever bought anything from Amazon? What do you see when you look at things on Amazon?
The shipping costs.
Okay, well, what else do you see?
Other things you might want to buy.
Okay, what else? We're talking about you potentially screwing people.
Reviews.
I'm sorry, reviews. And so imagine you're doing Dine and Dash, and now they create a database of all customers who have dined and dashed. Whenever you go into a new restaurant, they scan your face and see if you're on the do not serve list. So you're with Amazon, where they post the reviews, people are very concerned. A lot of companies will actually pay people now to either write good reviews, or if you write a bad review, they'll pay you to remove it and adjust it. And so a lot of this comes down to, are we in situations where we know that there's going to be repeated events? Are we in situations where there's going to be a track record and a paper trail? One of my favorite examples, so we heard about Nash's Nobel Prize in economics. Richard Feynman has a Nobel Prize in physics. And he was one of the many people involved in the Manhattan Project. It was extremely important that they keep secrecy about the project. And so it would look a little suspicious if a bunch of physicists all traveled to the Southwestern desert. So they were all told, go from different places. Well, there were a lot of people going from Princeton, and Feynman figured out, well, if everyone else is going from some other place, I can go from Princeton. And this is very similar to the pollution. Since no one else is going from Princeton, why don't I go from Princeton? And when he traveled to the desert, they go, so it's your stuff. I'm sorry? We've been shipping all this equipment from Princeton for the past few months. We were wondering who it belonged to. We finally found out who it, so they had forgotten that they had to change how they were shipping. They were so concerned with just making sure the people didn't all come from the same spot. Be very careful in terms of what information are you giving out. You may give out information that people can think of. In terms of the fixed point theorem, where we have these pure strategies. This is labeling the 0, 1, 2, and there's got to be a 0, 1, 2 triangle, and as you zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. That's essentially Nash's thesis. That's essentially the proof. And this is why we spent so much time earlier in the semester talking about, if I give you a space to study, what spaces are equivalent to it. So if I know a fixed point theorem here, when can I transfer that to a fixed point in another setting? Just because we can do the theoretical does not mean that we can actually find. And so for a lot of these things, it's just too many possibilities to do an exhaustive search, but it is interesting to know that there's an equilibrium. And then the question becomes a huge amount of human psychology. Who are you playing against? Are you playing repeated games? Are you building a track record? Any chess fans here? So anybody remember the Deep Blue Kasparov match from a long time ago? I think this was the first time a computer beat the world champion, but it was not a fair match. And the reason it wasn't fair is that, from what I read, they kept the training games of Deep Blue secret. You would never have your two grandmasters playing each other without an extensive paper trail of their previous games. What kind of openings do you like? What kind of end games do you like? And so there is an advantage in knowing the strategy, knowing the profile of the person you're playing against. When you're playing against each other, it would be interesting if we did this many times where we had 3 games where you played each person against you. Imagine you announce those results. So you now know going into, hey, this person was collaborative, this person screwed. So you now have a track record. Again, it's very different when you know how much things count. And the last thing is, who's following World Cup soccer? All right, how much is a win? How much is a tie? How much is a draw? No, win is not 2. Win is 3 points. Tie is 1 point. A loss is 0 points. And so a win and a loss and a tie is actually much better than 3 ties. That gets you 4 points versus 3 points. And so it really changes how people play. So something to think about is, what if we changed rock, paper, scissors so that a win is worth 3 points, a tie is worth 1 point, and a loss is worth 0? Would you still have the same optimal strategy of just doing 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Because again, you don't know who you're facing. So does the answer depend on the payouts? For some things, almost surely. We saw in the modified prisoner's dilemma that it can change where you want to be based on the payouts. For some things, it might still be the same. So just lots of good things to think about. All right, I'm going to stop here.